about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love.
Okay, so today I want to discuss a connection between the Idaho murders and the murder of Britney Drexel. A lot of you will remember that case. I did 2 videos, I believe, on the case. Before there was an arrest, she was just a missing person. And, you know, there's a connection there. Not probably what you think, but as I was thinking today about some things that bother me, that law enforcement sometimes does, and I was like, Britney Drexel. There's a case that was screwed up. Now, you remember, I give credit where credit is due, most certainly, but when law enforcement screws up, I'll point that out as well. I don't have a problem with that. So, this is a case that was screwed up. And it links to the Idaho murders through law enforcement. So, before I get to that connection, let's go back and talk about Britney Drexel. Okay, Britney Drexel, I believe she was like 15 years old. No, she had to be older than that. She had to be like 17, 18. She had snuck off to go to Myrtle Beach with some friends back in April of 2009, and she went missing. And it was a big case. Mom kept it in the public. Mom even reached out to me a few years ago. A lot of speculation of what happened. If you go back and watch my video on the case, you'll see exactly what I thought, and it turned out to be true and accurate. And that gets me to 2016, I want to say, when the FBI receives a tip from an informant named, I believe, Taquan Brown. And Brown is facing some time. So Brown decides to talk. Brown says, you know what? I was owing a debt to a guy named Tim Taylor. I believe that's his name. I want to get that right. Yes, Tim Taylor. Both like they're teenagers, maybe in their 20s. Drug money. I took it to a stash house where Tim Taylor's father was and Tim Taylor was. I walked through the house, the living room, and lo and behold, who I see there? Britney Drexel being sexually assaulted by a group of guys. I continue to the backyard because, you know, in his world, I guess that's not a big deal. Start talking to the father, give father the money. Next thing I know, Britney Drexel comes busting out the door. In tow is Tim Taylor. They grab her, corral her, take her back into the house. This doesn't alarm him. He still stays there, and a few minutes later, he hears 2 gunshots. He assumes that that's Britney being killed. He then witnesses Britney being rolled up into a rug and subsequently dropped and fed to the alligators. Now, this is in 2016 that Taekwon gives this information about Tim Taylor. The FBI, in its infinite wisdom, decides to take this information public. And they hold a press conference. And it's this Agent Munez, I believe, and publicly declare that Tim Taylor is the murderer of Britney Drexel. Now, if you go back and watch my video, I explain why that is complete horseshit. Now, I'll link that video to the end of this. So at the end, you just have to, it'll come up, click on it, and it'll take you to that video. It makes no sense. It makes zero sense. You know, that the whole story, it doesn't make sense. So why would the FBI, who are supposed to be, and this has been tarnished a little lately, the premier law enforcement agency in the world. It's not even close anymore, I don't think. And remember, I worked for the FBI. The FBI gave me right there that Liberty Bell with my name and everything inscribed on it. You know, I worked undercover for them for a number of years. Worked out of their office, everything. But they screwed this up. Big time. It doesn't bother me that one person screws up. You know what I mean? Maybe this Munez. But he's got bosses. And they have to sign off on this stuff. The people that actually believe this story, I guarantee they've never worked a case in their life like this because it makes no sense. You know, I knew Britney Drexel was abducted for sexual purposes, more than likely by a sexual offender previously. She wasn't held captive. She wasn't part of a sex trafficking unit. And this story about her getting fed to the alligators is simply untrue and doesn't make sense. Why would they decide to kill her when this Taekwon Brown is there and shows up? There's another witness. But yet, they're going to decide. They had already captured her. Remember, she ran. They captured her, bring her back. They're going to decide to kill her and wrap her up right in front of him. I mean, it made no sense. And the people that believe that, I fear because they work as law enforcement. This is what happens when you don't get outside help. I guarantee if they would have showed this scenario, I guarantee they didn't do this. If they did, I would be totally shocked. If they would have showed this to their criminal profiling unit, they would have been like, no. No. That's what I would have said. There's no way. But to me, I think people try to get publicity from solving big cases. And I think that's what must have happened here. Had to have. Because if you believe that story, you're a moron. And you shouldn't be working in law enforcement. So, they decide, the FBI and Tim Taylor's attorney, hey, take a polygraph. He says, okay. He takes a polygraph and he fails. He fails the polygraph. Now, the FBI is really, invested in this guy. Fast forward to 2019, and Taquan Brown, the informant who started all of this, gives an interview to the station, and he basically tells the same story that he had told the FBI, and the FBI had made public and publicly accused this Tim Taylor. But he did have some degree of deception in that interview. And if you broke down what he told the FBI in that interview, you could certainly see that. You don't even need to be an expert to see that. Let's fast forward. That was 2019. Fast forward to May of 2022. An individual, a registered sex offender named Raymond Moody, confesses to the murder of Britney Drexel, leads police, FBI to Britney's remains. He is arrested, incarcerated. End of story. Now, the point of this is those FBI agents that went public and blamed Tim Taylor for this murder, haven't heard a peep from them. Where are they at? Why don't they hold a press conference and publicly apologize to Tim Taylor? That's what I want to know. You, without any evidence, held a press conference for the world to see, blaming this guy, and he was completely innocent. Completely innocent. Proven. Yet, we don't hear a word from you. You should be fired. You should be sued. That's why it's very important as law enforcement that you never do that. You never publicly blame anybody, especially when there's no arrest. You didn't arrest this guy, there's nothing. You took a jailhouse snitch's word for it. Why? You ruined that guy's life. Forever. I don't care if somebody else has been arrested now. Anytime he goes to the grocery store, goes to fill out a job application in that area, they're going to be like, oh, that's the guy that FBI accused of murdering Britney Drexel. Because of you. It's your fault, FBI. And all the bosses that signed off on it. How could you think that that would be a good idea? Especially when the story made no sense. That's the whole thing. If you knew what the hell you were doing to begin with, it wouldn't have happened. I am so passionate about this because you only get one shot in life. Once your name is ruined, there's no coming back from it. Yet, you know, when civilians publicly point their finger, yeah, that's bad, right? I don't like that. You've seen that in the Idaho case, which we're going to get into the connection. But who believes half of these civilians, these internet sleuths, that try to make these connections and try to pretend to be cops when they're not? But when the FBI points the finger, people listen. I listen. Ooh, okay. They got something. Not here. They were completely wrong in every facet. And I hear no apologies. And that bothers me. Now, let me tell you how it should have been done. An informant, and I've had hundreds, if not thousands of informants in my 20-year career. If they tell you something, you corroborate it somehow, some way. Now, if it's another snitch that does that, you're going to probably go with it a little bit. But you go with it inside the walls of the FBI. You don't go and have a press conference without any evidence. Publicly blaming the guy. If you want to go and have a press conference, you say, hey, we have information that Britney Drexel was being held at a house, and you don't mention any names. You're just vague about it. If you want to update the public or get information, that's what you do. You keep the name in-house until you have evidence of such. How this happened is beyond me. It's insane. And then let's talk about the polygraph that this guy who was innocent failed. Now you see why I don't believe in polygraphs? Now, polygraphers, they will tell me, well, it's all about who's given the polygraph. It's bullshit too. Polygraphs don't work. Okay? Yes, they do work on some. They don't work on others. To me, that means it doesn't work. If it ain't 100%, you can't rely on it. So this is just another case to show you that polygraphs, you can't rely on them. This guy failed it, and he's completely innocent. He didn't have anything to do with this. He never saw her. Moody picked her up off the street, kidnapped her, sexually assaulted, raped her, strangled her, buried her, and that's the end of the story. Just like I said a year ago, 2 years ago, whenever I did that video. You have to know what you're talking about in order to publicly go out and do these things. So, how does this relate to Idaho, you ask? Well, remember last year when everybody was looking for the Idaho murderer? The FBI, Moscow police, the hundreds of thousands internet wannabes, everybody. And nobody could find them. And nobody could guess who it was. Well, the internet did. Well, it's the hoodie guy. It's the food truck guy. It's the police chief. Freaking idiots. But a former FBI agent takes the stage. And he takes the grandest of stages. Fox News, podcasts, News Nation, all these places. And in his infinite wisdom, he decides to point the finger at the victim's father, Steve, in a roundabout way. He says he's very suspicious. I would look into, these things. That's not nearly as bad as what the FBI as a whole did to Tim Taylor. Yet, he still pointed the finger at a victim family member, the father. He didn't come right out and say he did it, but he might as well have. You don't do that. Especially if you are, I hesitate to say expert. Just because you have the title of an FBI in your name, it doesn't make you an expert in that field. Okay? People see FBI and they think they're an expert on murder. No, 99% of them never worked a murder case in their life. And that's okay. If you are studied in that vocation, But when people see FBI, they think that they know it all, especially about murder. And it's not true. There are a select few of them that I would consult any day of the week. Mary Ellen O'Toole. She knows what she's talking about. Jim Clemente, he knows what he's talking about. Mark Safarick knows what he's talking about. But this guy, I don't even want to say his name, but he come out and point the finger at the victim's family. It's wrong. It was wrong then and it's wrong now. Now what's the connection? The FBI, right? The FBI, now this agent is retired who blamed Steve Gawclaves. Is that the last name, how you pronounce it? But it doesn't matter if you're retired. You know why? Because you are still claiming the FBI in your name title. John Doe, retired FBI agent. You put that there. So you fall under the blanket of the FBI. You're using that name to your advantage. So people will take you serious. And so you can get on these TV shows and do these things. And then to make a mistake like you did, you have to take the wrath of that. Now everybody makes mistakes. But if you're a professional, you know how to go about it. You can't blame the victim's family, especially with no evidence. He should be looked into. He's acting strange. He's saying no. If you know what you're talking about right off the bat, you know he's not involved. Just by looking at what happened. You know he didn't do it. And if you didn't know that, then you shouldn't be claiming yourself as an expert. Now, you didn't ruin this guy's life, but you put suspicion and doubt on him for no reason. For no reason. And then you chastise internet wannabe detectives. I don't have a problem with that because I do that. Okay? I'm not a hypocrite. But what did you just do by pointing your finger at the victim's father? You did the same thing. So you're a hypocrite. Right? Just because you have the title FBI doesn't make you an expert. Period. End of story. I am less upset about the Idaho case and that agent because there's always rogue agents and so on and so forth who don't know what they're talking about. But that Tim Taylor case and Britney Drexel, that bothers me bad. Especially since there was not a peep. You saw him at the press conference blaming the guy. And then when there was an actual arrest for the real offender, then where are you, FBI? Why aren't you out issuing an apology instead of puffing your chest out with your ego and saying, we're still right. We were right. How could you have been right? Everything you did was wrong in that case. And Britney Drexel's family had to ride this roller coaster ride because why? They put their trust in you, the FBI. They're probably like Myrtle Beach police. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. But the FBI does. Yes. We all think that. That's why I wanted to work for them. When they came and asked me to work for them, I was blown away. Absolutely. And every day I went to their office and seen the FBI plaque there, and I just would shake my head. I can't believe that I'm working for the FBI. I felt that way. You got to do a better job. Now, the FBI has done incredible work in some cases, and they probably don't get the credit that they deserve on those cases. And just like everything else, when something bad happens, the light shines right on them. But that comes with the territory. And you got to be man enough to stand up and say, I was wrong for publicly blaming this guy who had nothing to do with it. So what can we learn from this? How about you keep your theories and your opinions general, and if they're not general, if they are specific to a person, to yourself. You don't publicly blame an individual without evidence, especially law enforcement. The internet sleuths are going to do what they want to do. You're not going to stop them. But nobody's going to listen to them. They're not law enforcement. It's law enforcement who people are supposed to have the utmost trust and respect for. Right? I know I do. But when you see shit like this happen, and then no apologies, where's the repercussions? Tim Taylor had repercussions. His life was ruined. He's being portrayed on Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted as somebody that's involved in this. And he didn't. It's sad. It's sickening. It should never happen. In a society like we have, it should never happen. Yet it does. So let's learn from it. Okay? When mistakes happen, you have to learn from it. And then move forward. I would challenge the FBI to come out and apologize publicly to Tim Taylor. That's what I think should happen. Maybe it did happen and I just didn't see it because it didn't make national news or whatever it is. But I doubt it. They probably just moved on. Who cares? Sad. Very sad state of affairs. So, anyhow, to me, that's a connection between Britney Drexel's case and the Idaho murders. You thought it was going to be Kohberger. You thought somehow Kohberger, because that's what conspiracy theorists do. They somehow can relate and, Kohberger traveled through Myrtle Beach in 2009. Therefore, he must have murdered Britney Drexel. That's not how real investigations are done. So, anyhow, that's my 2 cents today on Unsolved No More. Mains out.
Yeah, let's talk about